I will be reading this book as part of my book reading series. So I'll try, inshallah, to read this book from the start to the end. And I hope you will be able to find it most beneficial and useful. Some disclaimers before I start. I'm not a student of philosophy. I have never studied officially under Professor Syed Muhammad Naquib al-Attas, who is the author of this wonderful book. I have attended some of his lectures, but I will never consider myself officially as a student of his. All right. So what I'm sharing now is my understanding of the book, and also that and I'll try my best to explain what's in the book as correctly, as accurately as possible. There are some parts where I may not be correct, so please bear with me and do correct me if you want to in the comments below. Other than that, I hope, like I said, that this book will be useful to all of you, inshallah, because I think it is, in my opinion, a very monumental book that is done in the tradition of the great Imam al-Razali. May Allah bless his soul. All right, so this book is quite tough reading. I found that people, and myself included, have found this book very difficult to understand because of the very academic language. But we'll try, inshallah. Okay, and we put our best foot forward with good intention, inshallah. Allah will make it easier for us and open doors to our understanding of this book. So with that, let's go on with the book itself. Preface to the second printing. Almost 20 years have elapsed since the first printing of this book, but its seminal ideas pertaining to the problem of Muslim education and allied topics of an intellectual and revolutionary nature, such as the idea of Islamization of contemporary knowledge and a general definition of its nature and method, and the idea of the Islamic university, the conceptualization of its nature and final establishment were formulated much earlier in the mid 1960s. They were formulated, elaborated, and disseminated here in Malaysia and abroad in academic lectures and various conferences and more than 400 public lectures, and were born out of the need for creative thinking and clarification of the basic concepts based upon the religious and intellectual tradition of Islam, and upon personal observation and reflection and conceptual analysis throughout my teaching experience in Malaysian universities since 1964. These ideas have also been communicated to the Islamic Secretariat in Jeddah in early 1973, at the same time urging the relevant authorities to convene a gathering of reputable scholars of Islam to discuss and deliberate upon them. In 1980, a commentary of a few paragraphs of that chapter pertaining to the concept of education in Islam was presented and read as a keynote address at the plenary session of the Second World Conference on Muslim Education held at Islamabad early the same year. Okay, we'll stop the reading up to this point for the moment, and I'll just give some reflection about what I've read from here. Basically, here you see Prof. al-Attas actually highlighting that his work, his ideas, his seminal ideas about Islamization, the Islamic university, and all the related ideas like the nature of man, knowledge, and so on, all these things were actually already presented at international uh, conferences among Muslim scholars. And some of them were even published. Some of these papers were even published in some books. And Alatas actually goes on to explain later why he actually brought this up. And his main concern is that these ideas will be appropriated by people who do not understand fully what he was talking about, and they would present a very vulgarized version of it which will only serve to mislead people. Okay, so without further ado, we'll continue with this, with the second part of this preface. Thenceforth, for the successive convenings of the World Conference on Muslim Education held in various Muslim capital cities, I was not invited, and my ideas have been appropriated without due acknowledgement and propagated since 1982 by ambitious scholars, activists, academic operators, and journalists in vulgarized forms to the present day. Muslims must be warned that plagiarists and pretenders, as well as ignorant imitators, effect great mischief by debasing values, imposing upon the ignorant and encouraging the rise of mediocrity. They appropriate original ideas for hasty implementation and make false claims for themselves. Original ideas cannot be implemented when vulgarized. On the contrary, what is praiseworthy in them will turn out to become blameworthy, and their rejection will follow with the dissatisfaction that will emerge. So, in this way, authentic and creative intellectual effort will continually be sabotaged. It is not surprising that the situation arising out of the loss of adab also provides the breeding ground for the emergence of extremists who make ignorance their capital. Since the value and validity of new ideas can best be developed and clarified along logical lines by their original source, I have, by means of my own thought, initiative, and creative effort, and with God's succor and the aid of those whom God has guided to render the support, conceived and established an international institute aligned to the purpose of the further development, clarification, and correct implementation of these ideas until they may come to full realization. The International Institute of Islamic Thought and Civilization, ISTAC, although formulated and conceptualized much earlier, was officially opened in 1991. And among its most important aims and objectives are to conceptualize, clarify, elaborate scientific and epistemological problems encountered by Muslims in the present age, provide an Islamic response to the intellectual and cultural challenges of the modern world and various schools of thought, religion, and ideology, to formulate an Islamic philosophy of education, including the definition, aims, and objectives of Islamic education, to formulate an Islamic philosophy of science, to study the meaning and philosophy of Islamic art and architecture, and to provide guidance for the Islamization of the arts and art education, to publish the results of our researches and studies from time to time for dissemination in the Muslim world, to establish a superior library reflecting the religious and intellectual traditions both of the Islamic and Western civilizations as a means to attaining the realization of the above aims and objectives. Those with understanding and discernment will know, when they ponder over the significance of these aims and objectives, that these are not merely empty slogans, for they will realize that these aims and objectives reflect a profound grasp of the real problems confronting the contemporary Muslim world. The aims and objectives of the Institute are by no means easy to accomplish, but with concerted effort from dedicated and proven scholars who will deliver it as a sort of organic body, which is itself rooted in authentic Islamic learning, and are in the same time able to teach various modern disciplines, we shall, God willing, realize the fulfillment of our vision. Even so, a significant measure of these aims and objectives has in fact already been realized in various stages of fulfillment. Concise books have already been published by ISTEC outlining frameworks for Islamic philosophies of education, including its definition and its aims and objectives of science, of psychology, and epistemology, as well as other such works which altogether will be integrated to project what I believe to be the worldview of Islam. It is within the framework of this worldview, formulated in terms of a metaphysics that our philosophy of science and our sciences in general must find correspondence and coherence with truth. ISTEC has already begun operating as a graduate institution of higher learning open to international scholars and students engaged in research and studies on Islamic theology, philosophy and metaphysics, science, civilization, languages, and comparative thought and religion. It has already assembled a respectable and noble library reflecting the fields encompassing its aims and objectives. And the architecture of his stack is itself a concrete manifestation of artistic expression that springs from the well of creative knowledge. Here, al-Attas expressed his great disappointment and perhaps even anger and frustration with regards to how his ideas have been misappropriated by Muslim scholars, activists, journalists, and so on. These people have taken upon his ideas and taken them off tangent from the original creative spirit that came from Professor al-Attas. And his concern is not so much an ego trip, but more because he felt that these ideas have been misappropriated, has been, to use his word, vulgarized. And because of that, you have the rise of mediocrity. So that means the quality of the ideas that subsequently follows from the misappropriated ideas that came that was taken from al-Attas has now gone off tangent, and it has become come out in a very bad shape. And because of this misappropriation of ideas by these academics and so on, the idea of Islamization has been misconstrued by many, and because of that, it has come under unfair criticism. It's like a straw man has been created, which becomes easy to cut down. So Alatas was very unhappy with this, and he was concerned about the need to bring back his ideas along his original lines of thought. And because of that, he knew that he has been barred from Islamic or Muslim conferences on education. So he decided that he has to put his ideas into reality. And he decided to do that through an institution called the International Institute of Islamic Thought and Civilization, or ISTEC for short. And he says that this institution was opened in 1991 was meant to actually put into practice his ideas about clarifying, conceptualizing, elaborating, and so on, ideas that are very important for the contemporary Muslim in this world where modernity is seen as the way to go, where there's a lot of imitation and copying of Western secular ideas, a cut and paste approach even with regards to Western ideas onto Islam. So he wanted to bring it back to its originality. And this is, I think, inconsistent. It is consistent with the spirit of Imam al-Ghazali, where he actually tried to bring back Islam, the thoughts concerning, the ideas concerning what is Islam back to what it was after the attack from the Neoplatonists in the past. So he set up this ISTEC in 1991, and he said that they've already started to begin their work on what he wanted ISTEC to be. He says that they've already published some papers on very important concepts and ideas, and it is his hope that this work will continue. This book was originally dedicated to the emergent Muslims, for whose hearing and understanding it was indeed meant, in the hope that they would be intelligently prepared when their time comes to weather with discernment the pestilential winds of secularization and with courage to create necessary changes in the realm of our thinking that is still floundering in the sea of bewilderment and self-doubt. The secularizing values and events that have been predicted would happen in the Muslim world have now begun to unfold with increasing momentum, and persistence due still to the Muslims' lack of understanding of the true nature and implications of secularization as a philosophical program. It must be emphasized that our assault on secularism is not so much directed towards what is generally understood as secular Muslim state and government, but more towards secularization as a philosophical program, which secular Muslim states and governments need not necessarily have to adopt. The common understanding among Muslims, no doubt indoctrinated by Western notions, is that a secular state is a state that is not governed by the ulama or whose legal system is not established upon the revealed law. In other words, it is not a theocratic state. But this setting, in contrast to the secular state with the theocratic state, is not really an Islamic way of understanding the matter. For since Islam does not involve itself in the dichotomy between the sacred and the profane, how then can it set in contrast the theocratic state with the secular state? An Islamic state is neither wholly theocratic nor wholly secular. A Muslim state calling itself secular does not necessarily have to oppose religious truth and religious education, does not necessarily have to divest nature of spiritual meaning, does not necessarily have to deny religious values and virtues in politics and human affairs. But the philosophical and scientific process, which I call secularization, necessarily involves the divesting of spiritual meaning from the world of nature, the desacralization of politics from human affairs, and the deconsecration of values from the human mind and conduct. Remember that we are a people neither accustomed nor permitted to lose hope and confidence, so that it is not possible for us simply to do nothing but wrangle among ourselves and rave about empty slogans and negative activism while letting the real challenge of the age engulf us without positive resistance. The real challenge is intellectual in nature, and the positive resistance must be mounted from the fortification not merely of political power, but of power that is founded upon right knowledge. We are now again at the crossroads of history, and awareness of Islamic identity is beginning to dawn in the consciousness of emergent Muslims. Only when this awareness comes to full awakening with the sun of knowledge will there emerge from among us men and women of spiritual and intellectual maturity and integrity who will be able to play their role with wisdom and justice in upholding the truth. Such men and women will know that they must return to the early masters of the religious and intellectual tradition of Islam, which was established upon the sacred foundation of the Holy Quran and the tradition of the Holy Prophet, in order to learn from the past and be able to equip spiritually and intellectually for the future. They will realize that they must not simply appropriate and imitate what modern secular Western civilization has created, but must regain by exerting their own creative knowledge, will, and imagination what is lost of the Muslims' purpose in life, their history, their values and virtues embodied in their sciences. For what is lost can never be regained by blind imitation and the raving of slogans which deafen with the din of development. They will discern that development must not involve a correspondence of Islam with the facts of contemporary events that have strayed far from the path of truth. And they will conceive and formulate their own definitions and conceptions of government and of the nature of development that will correspond with the purpose of Islam. Their emergence is conditional not merely upon physical struggle, but more upon the achievement of true knowledge, confidence, and boldness of vision that is able to create great changes in history. Syed Muhammad Naquib al-Attas, Kuala Lumpur, 27 Muharram 1414 or 17 July 1993 of the Christian era. Al-Attas then reminded us that this book, Islam and Secularism, is intended to warn the emergent Muslims, the Muslims who are just beginning to be awakened by the idea of being Islamized and properly Islamized, properly behaving like Muslims and thinking like Muslims. And this is consistent with what he has started with, perhaps with that book in the Malay language, Risalah untuk kaum Muslimin, right? And this so it is actually intended for these people. So, and these people is the one that he placed his hopes upon. So he continues to actually warn that actually what he has been warning about this in this book, and 20 years later, these warnings have come to sort of fruition, if you like, or has begun to come true, because the dangers of secularized ideas or secularization as a philosophical program is now even more rampant, more widespread, and perhaps this is due to the impact of globalization, especially globalization where it is transferred in the form of the English language in all the various forms of media, including the internet. So he says that because of this, then we must be clear as Muslims what this philosophical program is about. It is not to be associated with or confused with what is usually understood as the difference between theocratic state and secular state. He says those are two things. He's more concerned not so much with the political part, perhaps, but he's concerned with more what goes on in the minds of the individual Muslim. So that is why in this book, you'll find later that his solution to the problem that the Muslim is going to face or are already currently facing is actually their own education. So this their own education here means that he's concerned not so much with the Islamic State, but he's more concerned with the state of Islam in each and every Muslim. So education is the way that he wants to resolve this, and we will be reading more about that in the coming chapters. So lastly, he reminded us that as Muslims, we should not lose hope, just as he had not, in my view, because he has been barred from actually trying to promote his ideas any further, even by Muslims and by Muslims or by unethical Muslims. So he has decided to go his own way. He has started ISTEC. And so don't give up. The message is not to give up. Learn well what he is trying to convey to us. Understand well. Bring that meaning of what into our souls, all right, the message that he's sending to us. Bring it to our souls so that we understand it well, and then we will be able to take on this challenge at a very clever, intellectual, and correct way. So when we talk about the Sirat al-Mustaqim, all right, very often we talk about that as a straight path, but we forget that from when we talk about from the straight path, it is a straight path when you join 2 points with one single line in a straight line. That is a straight path. So the 2 points here basically means that actually you must know where it starts from, okay? And then you must know where it is going to end. So if we are aware of where it starts from and where it's going to end, we draw a straight line, then we are going to succeed, inshallah. But don't start with a straight line from somewhere else, right? The beginning is confused. So if the beginning is confused and the ending is even more confused, then we are going to be led astray. Na'uzubillah min zalik. So with that, I've ended my reflection on the preface to this book. And so we will next watch a video, inshallah, on the first chapter proper of this book. So inshallah, I will see you again. Do subscribe if you like what I have shared here. And I hope to see you then and for more reflections on my part. And I hope you will find them useful. Assalamu alaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.